While I'm getting... Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to Talking Niagara, and with myself and Dave Wheeler. Good morning, Dave. How are you? I'm still putting the thing together.
There.
I'm still putting everything together here. So there we go. We got the first part of our show is ready anyway. So there we go. Okay, so hope everybody's well, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. So how are you? How are you then, Dave?
I'm okay. How about you?
Good. Yeah. Things could always be better, but they could always be worse.
Yeah, so you're probably right where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, unless anybody's going to offer me something fantastic today, I'll probably be in that same spot tomorrow, won't I?
Oh, yes, you will.
And okay, so on Tuesday, we had a stadium-sized asteroid make a close approach to Earth. It was about 1 million miles away from Earth, but of course they're saying, well, there's always a possibility if it hits something and kinks out of its orbit that it's going to hit us.
Yes, and of course these things have hit Earth before, and what they don't tell you here in this article though is I think it's the same asteroid that said that's going to approach in 2035. Okay, well, let's just step back a bit. Yeah, so we had an asteroid coming very close to Earth, 1 million miles away, 2.6 lunar units or something like that. So 2.6 times as far away as the moon is.
Yeah.
And the average distance from the moon to the Earth, which is close, but it's not much of a problem for Earth, unless, of course, it maybe ricocheted off the moon or something, whatever, it would come in. Now, what's not generally known or talked about is there's an asteroid coming in 2035, and it might be the same one.
This one is coming back in 2035.
At that time, it's going to come really close to Earth. It's either this one or another one, but I think it's this one. 2035 is going to come very, very close to Earth. So close to Earth that scientists are working on it now on deflection devices. Because if this thing hits, we're toast. I mean, that's the end of the world as we know it. I mean, many things will survive, but civilization will completely change.
Yeah. Well, many things will survive, but many things will also, could also die. Yeah.
So right now, the world in general is looking for ways of deflecting that asteroid if it comes.
While it's passing close by, let's go up on it, land on it, put a whole heap of explosive devices on it, right, and blow the whole thing to smithereens when it's in deep outer space.
I think they're looking more at putting explosives on it to deflect its orbit enough to get away from Earth. I think that would probably be the best way. If you blow it up in the smithereens, then you don't know if you're going to blow it up small enough. So I'm not so sure what they have, but I like the United Nations. Of course, everybody is looking at ways of deflecting it as it comes in. If it's, it might not be, it's going to be close enough to be dangerous. So they're keeping an eye on it and trying to figure out ways of on it to get it deflected away. But it's also, I think, the United States is trying to deflect it right into the middle of China, and China is probably trying to deflect it right into the middle of the United States. But everyone else is trying to just deflect it out of the world.
So that basically means it's going to land in Canada. Right? Yeah, I don't know. Well, Yeah. The thing is about these. Okay, so good morning, Mike. How are you? All right.
Metaphysical
Oh, yeah.
Mike.
So the thing about
Where's
these
Gary?
is that they we get these all the time that come fairly close, but normally not that close. And the one in 2035, whether it's this one or another one, is the one that they put most danger on.
Yeah, and I have to apologize to Mike. I haven't really looked. I read just quickly over that report that he got from Wayne Gates about the Welland River there, and I haven't given it time enough to report on it here on the show. Maybe we can have Mike come in and tell us that maybe on Friday if you want
He could do that.
to do that.
He can only come in for portion because
tell us what he thinks are the significances of it.
Yeah, he can probably only do that for the first portion of the show, but we could do that.
Yeah, we just have him on in the first 15 minutes or something to bring us up to speed on what's going on there as he sees it. I mean, he's pursued this. He's like a terrier with a bone on this, and he ain't gonna give it up. And I don't know. I just have to tip my hat to him.
He's saying he's off on Friday. There you go.
He's off on Friday. Well, maybe the following week. It's written up in the pointer, yeah. And I'm off on Friday. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm off on Friday. Does that mean he can come on the show, or is he, or does he want to?
No, I'm presuming that means he's off work Friday.
Oh, so he's available for the show, or he just wants to take a day off?
Well, let's confirm afterwards. We can easily get him on anyway. Okay. So we're looking. Okay. So yes, he can come on tomorrow. So there you go.
What a team!
You're welcome.
What a team! Metaphysical Mike and the Green Bastard from Parts Unknown.
Okay. So Ontario is looking at ways to basically address some of Toronto's suffocating congestion. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford was speaking at the Toronto Region Board of Trade, and he said he's planning to bring big changes, particular how to routes like the Gardner Expressway, Highway 401 works. And one of the things that he's talking about is not about expanding the footprint of these roads, because they can't add lanes so much in these roads, because many of them, there's no land available to add on either side anyway, so that you can't expand the asphalt that way. But he's talking about, I'm in favor of exploring the cost of tunneling, or the cost of double decking these roads like they do in New York. I'm not familiar with New York ones, but I'm familiar with the ones down in California. He's saying, let's find out the cost for this. Do we want double deck highways?
Well, ever since he's been a councilor, when he was a Toronto councilor, he's been playing with these kind of ideas, and he's been thinking of either layering on, because of the congestion of Toronto, he's thinking about layering on more elevated highways. So if you look at the Gardner Expressway, and then you think of another layer on that and another layer on top of that, in order to reduce the amount of congestion. He's also thought about tunneling underneath, as like the big dig back in Boston. They had the big dig, huge tunnel system that relieved congestion in the city of Boston. It was like a major engineering project, one of the biggest of the century. And I'm not so sure that's going to be much of a relief. It will, on the plus side, it will add a lot of infrastructure spending. That means a lot of government money will be going into.
Yeah, good for jobs.
There'll be lots of jobs. And the congestion will reduce once they're all built, whether it's a tunnel or more elevation.
whatever option is selected, you're talking about probably 10 to 15 years of even worse congestion.
Possibly. It depends on how they do it. It definitely depends on how they do it. It's not like twinning the roads because there's no place to twin them.
Yep.
Unless they can find a way of fanning them out in a way like kind of like an umbrella.
Yeah.
Or like that. But otherwise, their options are to go up. Yeah. And the Gardner Expressway is getting a little bit old. As a matter of fact, my grandparents had to leave their home because of the Gardner Expressway. It ran right over top of their home, so they had to be bought out and told to get lost. and
probably
my grandmother did not want to move.
Yep,
you can't tell me to go. So, but the Gardner Expressway is getting pretty old, and of course, it's going to have to be repaired, and then more repairs and more repairs.
Well, yeah, and okay, so the concept. So, what basically you're saying is, for example, taking the Gardner Expressway. If we were to take the Gardner Expressway and we were to do a double decker of the Gardner Expressway, what we would essentially have to do would be knock the current Gardner down, build a new multi-story Gardner. So we're building, 1, 2, 3 floors with traffic heading in whatever direction we need it to head in, and the associated ramps that go alongside that.
Yeah, it'd be a major project.
It would.
However, the opposition simply says, why don't we just subsidize the trucks so that they can use the 407? That would reduce it immediately. If you allow the trucks to go along the 407 with reduced rates, that would take a great deal of the congestion away, because, of course, trucks are a major part of our traffic congestion. Well, but after thinking about that, you think yourself, why do people pay for the 407? They pay for it because it's a highway that's less congested. So what you're saying is, let's make the 407 as congested as anywhere else. That kind of shoots the purpose of the 407.
Actually, there is an interesting thought that I had many years ago when I was looking at London. I was thinking one of the biggest problems that you have is all these trucks out at a time when people were looking to get into work. And generally the worst time for having trucks on the road, and especially when you've got things like trucks, they come to a point and then they back into a yard, which means that the traffic comes to a standstill at that point for 20 minutes as the truck comes, as the truck has to navigate the traffic in order to back into the yard. I thought to myself, why do we permit trucks to be on the road in congestion time, particularly in the morning congestion? It's never a problem in the evening one. Why do we permit the trucks to be on the road at that time? Now, in saying that, I've later thought to myself, well, trucks have got as much right to be there as any car transport, because they've got business to do just as much as the person trying to get to work has,
Yeah. And everybody works during the daytime, or mostly. Like, trucks are on the highway 24/7. Have you ever gone down the road at night? And there's trucks all the time now. When I used to hitchhike, I every once in a while a truck driver would pull over, and then like I'd be hitchhiking at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and a truck would pull over and I jump in. But you could do that on the highway back then, on the QEW back in those days. You could just slow down and stop in the lane, because there wasn't that many cars on the lane. I mean, there'd be one every minute or so, and I'd jump in the truck. And I got a couple of rides with transport truck drivers. One between Syracuse and Buffalo, and the other one from Toronto to Grimsby and St. Catharines, and I jumped in, and the condition was to help him unload the truck. So I was hitchhiking. He says, "I'll let you in, but you got to help me out. I'm not getting it. Where are you going, Niagara Falls?" "Well, I'm going to Niagara Falls eventually. So if you jump in, you got to help me unload this truck at Grimsby and St. Catharines and Niagara Falls. Is that okay with you?" "Oh yeah, sure." So I jumped in, and we went to Grimsby, and he had a truckload of bread. I think he was everything bread and bread products from, I don't know whether it was Wonder or whatever the bread company was. And so we went to grocery stores, and I helped him unload these skids of bread.
And what time did you arrive? 6 hours later in Niagara Falls?
I think it was past 2:00 in the morning by the time, and I got the lift at about I think it was around 11ish when he picked me up.
Yeah. But the thing is about these is that, you know, the other solution, of course, and many people will say, will be things like, well, instead of using the roads, we need to encourage people off the roads, get them onto railways.
Well, there's all kinds of things, like having just come from Portugal, and that's the first time I've been in Europe for some time. And I mean, the network of transportation they have there is brilliant. Like, I rented a car. I really shouldn't have. I could have got everywhere I wanted to go on trains or buses or subways, in every town, even the small ones, even the remote towns a couple of the remote towns I went to had a train service to them. We don't. Mike says, "LOL. Did you do the hitchhiking policy, George Carl?" No, I didn't have to do that. But I was ready there to service any woman who needed.
Yeah, likely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was back in the days. Before I got the lift,
there used to be a rule about.
I get lifts from women in the middle of the night back in those days. I got when I hitchhiked, women would pick me up, and they weren't afraid of you back in those days.
I was going to say, there was a time at one point whereby a man hitchhiking alone, the rule there is don't get in a car that's full of women, right? Particularly good-looking women, because of the accusation of rape that could come out of the other end. And similarly, men don't pick up a woman because of the accusation of rape that could come out of the other end.
None of that stuff was.
But anyway,
a problem back then. It wasn't. Like I got picked up by women, and at one time a woman picked me up, and there was a whole bunch of us at the turnpike down in Massachusetts somewhere, I think it was, and it was hitching, and so she picked me up, and I says, "Wow, I got lucky. All those people," and she says, "I picked you because you were the kindest looking person. You looked like a kind person."
There we go. Kind. Dave Wheeler, kind. Yeah. That was your starter for the career in Kiwanis, wasn't it?
I don't know. I think probably everybody else there was just as kind as me, but maybe they didn't look it. I must have had an aura going on that day. But anyway, she felt safe with me. So she said, "Oh, she felt obligated to pick up somebody, because back in those days, people picked hitchhikers up." And she saw me,
nowadays you could stand there. You could stand there for 3 days on the same spot, and everybody's going whoom, whoom, right?
Yeah, I think it's been about 5 or 6 years since I've picked up a hitchhiker. But anyway,
you don't see them as much these days, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but how is that going to solve the congestion problems that we have with the 401 and the Gardner, etc., etc.?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's one thing we could do. We could suggest that people leave the cars at home and hitchhike. Well, that's not going to work.
Well, apparently this question about reduced tolls for the 407 is something the NDP brought out a few years ago.
Well, how dumb is that? I'm telling you that if you do that, then that 407 is going to be completely clogged up with trucks. And the whole idea of people paying for the 407 is to have a better trip, less congestion. Well, it doesn't, I only use it in emergency search situations myself.
That's exactly the only time I've ever used it is when the new, I'm heading to the airport, let's say, and the news has already told me that, hey, the 403 up to Mississauga is already, backed up all the way from, Burlington to Mississauga. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can skip around that lot by using the 403.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. It's
sorry, 407.
407. Yeah. So it's I don't know. Ford likes the big projects idea. The NDP, of course, wants a simpler solution, but the NDP solution would only be temporary, because what would happen if they gave the trucks enough subsidies to go on the 407? That's just going to make that just as worse as just about anything else. It may relieve some of the traffic for a period of time, but within 5-6 years, it'll be just as bad everywhere.
Yeah, it'll be just as bad everywhere.
You're better off to buy the 407 back and open it up. And Harris sold Premier Harris sold the 407, by the way, to private interest. But we forget why he did. He sold it because when he got into power after the Ray government was so far in debt, and our credit rating was already at AA, and looks like it was going to slip. So he had to do something. So even though Harris overall is not really thought of that well, that's something I think he had to do, which still bugs me, because I think that highway should have been for everyone. But there was a huge project set about during the NDP time and coming to fruition, and that should have been a major highway that everybody could have used.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, no, not that. So I don't know what their solutions are going to be. Bigger, higher, more just brings more congestion. And I think that public transport is the way. I mean, already when people go to parking lots and combine their forces, carpooling, they could do the same thing, bring their cars to a parking lot, keep them there, and jump on a train.
Yeah.
Or
well, in fact, actually, you think. Well, that's exactly what I do. 9 times out of 10, if I'm heading into Toronto, I will head up. If I'm heading into Toronto during the business week, I'm going to head up to Burlington, park the car in Burlington, get on the on the Lakeshore West Go train, and head into Toronto. It's rare that I'm going to go into Toronto because of the parking nightmare that exists down there.
Yeah, it's already, those things are already happening. And if we make more and more of that available to people, then you wouldn't have that. And you're thinking of a car, you think of everybody getting on a bus. Say everybody parks someplace like Burlington and gets on a bus or a train. You think of all the cars there, almost all the commuters in going into Toronto are one person.
Mm.
So if you think of it as just complete waste of carbon fuels and time and energy, you're thinking of all these cars, 2,000-pound cars pushed down the highway with an engine. If you take them off the road, one busload of people, if you get 50 people on a bus, you know what I mean? There's 50 cars off the road, and one bus would maybe equal 2 cars, basically.
Well, again, what has actually made that better has been the fact that they're now, for example, running more of these train services out to places like, Niagara Falls. They're going further with these trains, but On average, I could set off the same time as the train leaving Niagara Falls and get onto an earlier train in Burlington than I can, on the I'd beat that train from Niagara Falls and leave at the same time. I could beat that train to Burlington on
Well, the
average.
double-edged sword there, if our trains become more frequent, we're going to have more people down here. They're going to buy more houses. The housing price is going to go up. So that's the other part of it. But you're right. There should be more. Like we're late to the game here, and as anyone has ever been to Europe knows that, particularly Western Europe, that trains, buses, subways, all that is really good. And when I was in Portugal, they had electric buses, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So they had electric buses, which reduced the amount of particulate in the and pollution in the air. Electric cabs.
Consider this also that when the London Underground was built, it was probably 1/5 of the size of what it is today. But when the London Underground was built in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, it was funded entirely by private money.
Yeah, well, that's also 160 years ago.
Yeah,
and so I don't know if you can find combined private services, because as soon as you introduce private companies into transportation, as we've seen with the 407, that's a private company running a 407 and costs a lot of money to go on that highway.
Yeah.
If a private outfit starts building tram lines or whatever else, then that's a lot of money. There are instances where the Cook brothers in certain cities in the United States encouraged people to use gas instead of electric buses years ago, discontinued or used their political influence to discontinue transportation lines because they had interests in gas and oil. So there's all kinds of mess going on underneath. If you could just plan it and say, this is what we want, and electric or whatever, and there's quite a network of transportation we could fill up all of Southern Ontario with easily.
Yeah. Well,
but it would take political will, and it would take a great deal of very good planning. The light rail systems that have been encouraged under John Tory in Toronto, and more subways, more bus lines.
Well, yeah, we need to probably quadruple the number of subway systems there are in Toronto.
I don't know how many more you need, but the surface trams are cheaper, and I would fill up as many as I could with that. They have a pretty good streetcar system in Toronto as it is. The streetcar and subway system in this part of town. But anyway, I'm thinking more along that's congestion of Toronto. But anyway, that has yet to remain to be seen. Grandiose schemes of Ford countered with the more moderate ideas of the NDP. The problem with the NDP's, the problem with Ford's ideas and mega projects is going to be a long time coming. The problem with the NDP project is very, very temporary.
Yeah, and the other problem with something like double-decking highways is you're going to be the Gardiner Expressway, if you were going to be doing that, would be out of action for like 20 years.
Well, no, they would coordinate it in such a way because they can build the upper deck without really messing with the lower.
No, you'd have to be quite honest, you cannot put anything on the current lower deck. That current lower deck is so dangerous that it needs to be taken down in reality. If you're going to build a double-decker new highway, you take that current one down and you build an integrated system with with 2 or 3 decks on it.
That's possible. I don't see any engineer's report that comes with this.
No, I know we'd have to see that. Yeah, we'd have to see that.
And anyways, it's just those interesting things, and I think it spills over to more than that. as I said before,
Oh,
about
of
public
course.
transportation in Ontario. Like, I mean, you got to wait an hour for a bus here to get anywhere, and then it does the milk run. If we could improve that here, we might have a lot more people taking the buses. As a matter of fact, as complain as we might about too many temporary workers and students in town, they're the ones that are actually paying for our bus routes right now. They're the ones that are taking them.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, helping the unhoused get back to a familiar way of life by building sleeping cabins. That is what a Niagara Falls manufacturer is doing right now. So their modular energy solutions is saying that it manufactures basically cabins that are 13 foot by 8 foot, and with with all the things they need for to house a homeless person.
Yes, they. This is a kind of thing that's keep popping up. Little small homes for the homeless. In this particular case, they have a modular unit. This is no news really, but in this particular case, they cost about $23,000, and I think they're in and around here locally, or possibly. What they do is they put up a little modular uh, house, and that gives the homeless person a bit of security. I imagine what they're going to do is try to put these in places where the tents are right now, or other places where they
Well,
can
these
put
are
them
all
in.
made of fiberglass, and they're all basically it's a hermetically sealed unit. So you're not gonna, it should be basically fully, fully functional. Made of fiberglass, no holes in the walls, etc. No gaps between the floor and the ceiling, the floor and the walls.
Yeah, they call them a stepping stone. In fact, the first line says sleeping cabins are a stepping stone.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
what Modular Energy Solutions is saying about the cabins in it manufactures, and which give people experience homelessness, dignity, and respect as they work to get back on their feet, while also it gives them safety. Because in the
Yeah,
tent cities and all that, or even in the even in places like St. Andrews, where people go at night, or Salvation Army, where they go at night in Hamilton to find cover, they're not safe.
yeah.
There are people who will steal their stuff. As a matter of fact, someone I know who stayed in places like that, they were always constantly stealing
Yeah. Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Big problem still. But and you see, one of the things about these is they need to be, they did some container solutions, built basically 4 homes in a container, and utilized that in St. Catharines. But this is a better solution because it's basically these are tiny homes that built specifically for housing, housing the homeless.
Yes, and they're only a stopgap. And it says here that the turnover time will be days rather than weeks. I don't know how that happens. When you have a homeless person and you put them in one of these modular units, and then the idea here is to transfer them into something more permanent thereafter. But because of the lack of places for people to go, I mean, I can see people staying in these modular units for a very long time. And
Mm.
right now, Hamilton is thinking of
Well, Hamilton is basically, the Hamilton sanctioned encampments are utilizing these systems right now.
So what you are, and I've said this before, what you're going to end up with is shanty towns on the outskirts or certain parts of town.
Yeah.
What people are already talking about is get the homeless people out of the middle of the town where they're building tents and public parks and that. And they'll put modular units on the outside of towns, and they'll go in there. Now, these modular units will be a little bit safer. But what you're doing is you're putting a lot of problem people, a lot of people with mental disorders, a lot of people with addiction
Well,
disorders,
yeah, and
and you're
you've got
putting
to.
them all in the same place, and you're putting them in these cabins. Now, a little bit safer for each person, but unless you have a police force in there, along with that, you are asking for massive failure because you have all these different people with all
You
these
have to
different
have the.
problems.
Yeah, you have to have the supports available as well at the same place.
There has to be a combination of ways in which to encourage people to go there, and hopefully from there get treatment and then move on. But
Yeah,
you also have to make it such that they want to go there, because if there's too much restrictions on them, they'll go right back to the tent cities and live
yeah,
homelessly.
yeah.
So this is
Well,
and because of the mindset of a mentally ill or an addicted person is not normal. They don't like it. It turns their mind wrong. So what you want to do is treat them for their addiction and mental health, so that they begin now to remember they're human beings with aspirations, rather than just
yeah,
things
yeah.
that live like weeds on
Well,
the side of the road.
one of the things I wanted to also talk about, so you remember we reported last year, we reported on they put these new homes into the old stadium area in St. Catharines. They put these containers with each with 3 or 4 tiny units for the homeless. Now, I've since found out with those units, they kick those people out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Right. So it's not, they don't, whilst
They're
they've
just
got
like
a
a
place,
shelter. They're just like a shelter.
yeah,
They're just
it's
a little bit better than the shelter.
it's a little bit better than a shelter, but you're gone at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Well, if you're going to give them a place, you've got to give them a place where they can stay all day if they wish to.
That would be good. And well, I think in this particular case, not that particular case, but in this particular case, people are supposed to go to these modular homes,
I mean, they're
8 by 13, and they're only supposed to be there for a short period of time before they're moved into something more permanent. Like I said before, where are those places? And that's the biggest rub I can see with these. When they start making these modular units, I can't really see people moving out of them. And what you're going to get is a sort of a modular shanty town.
Yeah.
And like I say, unless you set it up well organized with the mental health organizations there, the addictions organization there, and its own little security force, you're not going to solve anything, because what you're trying to do is, these people are lost, and and very few of them transition out of there unless they're dying, basically. If somebody's so sick that they put them in a hospital and they can't let them out, they'll find them a place. The fact of the matter is, they can't work that way. If you're going to build these modular units and you do not have a place for people to go, and you don't have means by which to treat them for their mental illness or drug addiction or whatever else besets them, like lack of money, I don't know what to do. I mean, seriously, in this city, we've taken on thousands of refugees, and we put them up in hotels. We feed them, we shelter them, we have services in which to guide them into temporary work and visa applications and asylum, things like this. And we're not doing anything like that for our own people who are in desperate shape. It's a rather bitter irony, if you ask me.
It
So
is.
a modular system like this would kind of service the people in a similar way. So in this particular case, you'd have to have places where they can find nutritious food to eat as well. And you can't do that by just putting them up there and say, okay, sit here for a little while. What's going to happen is your drug dealers are going to move in, your people smugglers are going to move in, all kinds of because these are vulnerable populations, and vulnerable populations invite crime because the crime can get away with it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they just by building them and putting up there is not enough. There has to be more of a plan.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and I think there has to be more of a plan. There has to be more support, and the housing. The people who are providing the housing in the first place, I congratulate them on what they're building here, right? But it's the implementation, which is where we say there needs to be more of a plan. Okay, so let's move on. Ontario seems to be the hotspot right now for Canada's tornadoes again.
Yeah, we've had more tornadoes than any other province, and we've had almost twice as many as Saskatchewan, which is the next province. So we've had 32 tornadoes in a year. Saskatchewan's has 17. We've had we've had one unusual one. We had one in the wintertime, tornado in the wintertime. That tells a really good story about children at a birthday party, and they ran outside to play. This was November. They ran outside to play because snowballs were falling from the sky. Well, that was so they were far enough away from the tornado. They didn't have to worry about that. But what the tornado caused was massive hailstones, but they didn't freeze totally. So they came down as snowballs instead of hailstones. So the kids ran outside. They had all these ready-made snowballs. Had a really good snowball fight. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
We have tornadoes like that. That's okay with me.
Yeah, but you see, most tornadoes are a bit more destructive than that.
Well, we do have, and fortunately for us, we've had only EJ, is it EF0, EF1, and EF2. So they're very, very mild, with one exception. In Calgary, they had an EF4. EF4 is the Fujita scale, the expanding Fujita scale. It's like the Richter scale, basically.
This is a scale that 1 is 100% higher than 0, and 2 is 100% higher than 1, and 3 is 100% higher than 2.
Yeah, it's an exponential scale.
Yeah,
just like the Richter scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the Richter scale is not magnitudes; it is exponential magnitudes of the previous level. Yeah, and that's the same as this. So most of our tornadoes have been rather small ones. You start getting around EP2, they can do some serious damage. I once worked with a guy who had a shop outside of Brantford. He was in the country, and he had a big shop where he did work on heavy equipment and cars. He was a mechanic, and I think he specialized in heavy equipment. So he had a big garage, and the tornado back in the late 70s, I remember it. It went right through his. Of course, it went right through his garage that he had, this big garage. And he told me a fascinating story. So the tornado ripped right through his garage, destroyed his garage, and he had on blocks an MG, and he had on blocks a dump truck, a big dump truck. The dump truck was thrown upside down and off its blocks, but the MG was in exactly the same spot it was. So the MG was completely undamaged, and it was the light car, but somehow the tornado hit got to the dump truck and flipped it. So the
thing is that something like an MG is low to the ground, whereas the dump truck has a lot of space underneath that it can pummel, the wind underneath, right?
I think it was just by chance. I think it was just wherever the force went, it went towards the dump truck and missed the. And whatever damage was done to his building was done on the side where the dump truck was. So, you know, I don't know. You'd have to talk to tornado experts to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
anyway, they can be destructive. There doesn't seem to be any more of them in relation to climate change so far, but I imagine in time there might be. But it's just 1980s till now. Nothing really has changed a whole lot. In the way of tornadoes.
And the thing is about things like tornadoes is it's actually when you come along afterwards, it's actually the damage they cause that's probably the most spectacular thing.
And most people are killed by debris rather than the tornado itself.
Yeah.
There's a tragic story of a child that was killed when a door flew shut, and because of the tornado, and the doorknob hit him in the head and killed him. That kind of thing. Those are the kind of things that happen. Flying debris. So that's why people have to get underneath something in a storm cellar of some sort. And of course, you're going to be a mark if you live in a trailer camp in the Midwest. Maybe not so much here, but I remember a tornado went through just south of Barrie. I think it was north of Barrie. It killed 2 people. You know,
well, the one in Goderich about 10 years ago killed about, I think it seemed to remember, killed about 5 or 6.
Yeah, that did hit a campground of some kind, didn't it? Or
yeah, exactly, because that campground was basically where it made landfall off of Lake Huron. Is that Lake Huron? I didn't know. That could be. That's not Huron, is it? Yeah, it is.
Huron. No. Yeah, Lake Huron there.
Yeah, where it made landfall off of on Lake Huron, it basically, yes, I believe that was a campground, and that's where most of the lives were lost. But when it came into town, it tore chunks out of their like shopping mall and things like that, and that's actually where one of the other lives occurred, because it literally caused the shopping mall to collapse in on itself.
Oh yeah.
If you remember.
Anyway, they're a dangerous thing, and we had 32 of them this year, and the earliest they come is in March. The earliest one we had was in March, so it was called a winter one. And the latest one we've had by record, not this year, obviously we have not in November yet, was in November. So they can come at any time of year, but June, July, August are the big months.
Yeah. So we're thankfully over the big months, but that doesn't mean we can breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, I don't know. I guess if there's one that comes through here and I find myself in a place where there's a yellow brick road, I'll just go talk to Oz and see if I can wangle something.
Okay, we got this other article. Union bosses show naked contempt for parents. Right, they're talking clearly here about schools and school teachers. And one of the things that I always hate this, because this writer Lee Harding, who I don't know that they haven't given a bio for, but the first opening statement that makes is too many union leaders want to discipline school children with cultural Marxist values. And whenever I hear that, I'm going, oh God, this rant again.
Oh, this is the dumbest thing I ever read, really. So they're trying to say that the unions are behind basically woke culture, I guess. I don't know. I can't. I for some reason I can't get to it.
Oh,
that article, but where was it? Like I don't have it here.
Okay. Yeah, and they took, well, it was a few days ago. And basically it's September and the children are back at school. Fall has also renewed parental and citizen concerns over the sexualization of children in teaching and books with values contrary to those being taught in their homes.
So there's supposed to be a 1 million march for children is being held across Canada, September 20th, and that's tomorrow.
Yeah.
And 1 year after the first one, and anyway, thousands will start the march because, well, there is a lot of fear among parents of what they're teaching in schools, and I think in Ontario we've pretty well got a very good balance in our McGinty Gwynn government. Sort of went on a little bit left field, as most parents thought, and when Ford came in, he restricted some of the things that are being taught there, using the call of parents basically to justify it. Now the protest is very little doubt that the protest is real. Is made apparent by the counter protest organized by unions. A leaked Zoom call with representatives of Ontario Federation of Labor, the Canadian Labor Congress, and Canadian Union of Public Employees, still available on Vimeo, shows that they have no esteem or nor place for the wishes of parents who want schools to teach literacy, math, and science, not gender ideology. So this idea of gender ideology and of that sort of thing is scaring parents quite a bit, and some too quite. And we noticed here the protests we had here in Niagara Falls in front of schools, where you had concerned parents, but they got a little bit loud. And what happens is somebody starts telling the parents that they are, bigots and trans bigots and all this other stuff. And then on the other hand, the schools themselves say, "Oh, we don't do anything wrong," and they refuse to have a good look at what they're doing. So basically, Patty Coates of the OFL expressed concern about 22 events in Ontario as in alignment with the march, calling it the rise of hate. Unfortunately, a far right hate mongers saying coordinated activism is really scary. Let's get to the root of this. This isn't a far right group or a or hate mongers. They sometimes appear that way, but it's not an organization for far right groups. This is an organization worried about what is being taught in their schools. Now, they may have unsubstantiated worries. They have to be addressed that way. The fact that the ideologies that are being taught in schools, or the fear of ideologies that are being taught in schools, have motivated a lot of people to complain in protest. I mean, how often do you get that where you have a lot of people getting out? 1 million people, they claim here, will get out and protest about what the school is doing. Whenever have you seen that before? In elementary, you don't.
I'm certainly some of the protests that are occurring. I understand. Whether you agree or not is a different matter. I understand where they're coming from. Other protests, I think there's different agendas at play here. Right? Other protests, and what we have to be sure about is that, hey, there's people protesting about
what other protests.
There's people protesting often about what the school curriculum is, but yet they're not understanding what the school curriculum is.
Well, that's part of it. I suppose that's part of it, because if there is certain things that people don't like, then it can really go off, and unfortunately, this is the thing that divides people, and this is the kind of thing that cements people into each corner.
Yeah.
the trans community and all that would say, well, you got to have naked people marching down the hallways. That's good for people. You can have men dressed as women with super big boobs doing shop class. That's just fine. And then, of course, the parents are not going to like that one bit, are they? So what happens then is both sides of it get further and further away from reality and demand things that are irrational. In this particular case, they're talking about the complaints about, now they call them hate mongers and that kind of thing, fascists and so on. But on the other hand, they more accurately describe them as misguided, irrational fears, and then falsely stereotype them. The leftist ideologies confess their fears of them suddenly making a fear a right and justifiable thing. I don't know. Right here, there's a lot of education that has to happen. People have to educate their everyone a little bit better, and I think the Ford government was the one, I think, that came out and made it very clear what the stance was of the Ontario schools and how far they could go one way or the other. And of course, those, like I said, the sort of the LGBT trans, whatever, they have an idea what they want to happen. Those counter them will have their idea. What happens is those ideas gets spread apart. So somebody has to come in and manage it and say, this is appropriate. And remember, you have to take into consideration what the parents think. Now, they may have some misguided ideas, but they have to be educated. On the other hand, they may not have. They may not like what is going on in the schools and how their children are taught. There's, you always get these stories about books that they find in schools somewhere in the States, and they're sexually explicit kind of things for children. And that's just, I think the average parent would think that's inappropriate. And anyway, the tacit statement admissions that unions were, in fact, indoctrinating in the schools, and they would not tolerate any other. That's kind of baloney. I can't really see a union, being part of a union, have anything to do with this at all.
Yeah.
I remember one of the conservative Hudak, I think it was the conservative, when he was running for premier, claimed that the unions were sending money to terrorists and other organized leftist organizations around the world. And I can tell you that's such a tall, big pile of bunk. Unions don't have money. Unions can't have money to influence politicians, just like big industry does. They have lobbies. But sending money outside the country, you would think the average union member would ever approve of that kind of thing? I mean, they're paying those union dues, and they don't want that money going somewhere outside the country.
Yeah.
In fact,
the
union leaders would lose the next vote instantly.
Yeah.
So there
exactly.
was fear mongering from the right. That was fear mongering. Saying, "Oh, look, this is what unions do."
Yeah, many of those union members have exactly the same concerns, so they're not going to vote for it.
No, this is rubbish, and it's. I honestly think that someone here has over, like Lee Harding was the article. I absolutely believe that they're just trying to stir up rubbish.
Well, and it's when you come back.
They have an agenda. They're doing the Overton thing, extremely exaggerating. It's just like they did the Overton thing with abortion. Oh yeah, you can kill a baby after it's born. Well, yeah, some people have proposed that, but it is generally thought to be the Overton thing. So if you want women to have the right to abort a child in its 5th month, then you say they should have the right to kill the baby after it's born in the so-called 4th trimester. And that argument has been put out there. And
Yeah.
so what they're really looking for is the other side of the argument, saying you get 6 weeks, so they find some sort of happy medium. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. It's sick. And
there's
here it
some
says too many union leaders want to disciple school children with cultural Marxist values, and of course the trans thing.
What I was going to say, I was going to bring us back exactly to that statement, right? I've seen so many people that utilize the term Marxist, and yet they don't have, I don't even say. So what does Marxist mean? They don't even have, it's basically anything that isn't what their viewpoint is. It doesn't mean it was Marxist, right? Marxist is being used as a method of actually describing something that they don't like as demagogic, right? Marxist isn't, understand what Marxist is before you start using the term, it's being used in the wrong way. And that's part of the problem that you have with articles like this. They're stirring because people are afraid of Marxism.
Well, yeah, it because of the way they use it in the States. Most of those politicians don't know what Marxism is.
Exactly.
Trump
My
doesn't
point.
know what Marxism is. You can tell how he uses it.
Yeah.
And all these congressmen that says, if we allow the Democrats to keep going on, we're going to turn into Venezuela. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible in the American political system to have a dictator that does Marxist policies. Like, anyway, Maduro isn't a Marxist.
Yeah.
If he claims to be, he isn't, but he's not a Marxist. And for that system, you see, because you can scare people who are ignorant.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that we're stupid here, but we are ignorant. We are a very ignorant population in North America, extraordinarily ignorant, if you ask me. And we don't know what Marxism is. We don't know what fascism is. We don't know. We only know those buzzwords.
Yeah, exactly. They're a buzzword. And for example, Marx wrote, the premier book that Marx wrote was Das Kapital, which is a book that describes how capitalism works. And I've heard there was a British industry leader that said, was asked a question one time about what his what regular books he regularly reads were, and he says Das Kapital because it tells him about how capitalism is organized.
Das Kapital was the first ambitious study of capitalism and how it has evolved from feudalism, basically, and how now the bourgeoisie,
the basically, the Wealth of Nations was arguably the first, but Marx was
no, the Wealth of Nations had nothing to do with economic history. It had economic evolution, basically. So the Wealth of Nations is completely different. I think the other book by Adam Smith, something to do with morality, is probably even more important. But the fact of the matter is, Adam Smith was more like sensible capitalism and a recognition of that. And that goes back to the 1700s. That goes back. I mean, George Washington and Jefferson was reading his books.
Remember, Adam Smith wrote Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations in a time when capitalism was much smaller. No, you didn't have what we would call imperialist capitalism, which is termed by some today, right? And Marx described the growth of the mega capitalist.
They're both of their works are completely different.
Yeah.
The Marx was a political thing, and it studied how capitalism had arrived and how the bourgeoisie were now displacing the aristocracy.
Yes.
And he saw them as those people who would replace the aristocracy and then act just like them.
Yes.
And he envisioned that, and he saw that happening in the Western countries, which did. What he didn't count on was were things like unions and stuff like that were able to hold back the oppressive power of the capitalists and the changes in society. But let's put it this way: like the average American politician, and I'm not talking about the average American person because unfortunately they are extremely ignorant of these things, but they can find out if they wish to, but they don't. What happens is somebody scares them. America is going to become Venezuela, and you hear this all the time on Facebook.
Yeah, but you see,
a bunch of fools. They don't know what they're talking about. They haven't got a clue what they're talking about. They haven't got an idea how Venezuela works. Ask them how Venezuela works. Oh, terrible, Marxist dictatorship. Well, show me how. Where?
But again, Das Kapital was written 170 years ago. Right. So again, it doesn't describe the modern era, and the modern era is entirely different and has some basis upon what is in Das Kapital, but only, only there's nobody done a more up to date study of how capitalism works.
Well, like I said before, he's kind of like Freud in a way. Freud was fraught with errors.
Yes,
but he was like, he actually it wasn't Freud. We call it Freudism, but it isn't. It was Freud's teacher that actually started all this. Fellow, his last name starts with an M, but B, I mean. But in whatever the case, Marx is like the first political economic observer. This is how things have been, and this is where they're trending. And if we don't stop that, we're going to be oppressed by this capitalist superclass. He's right in a way, because if you see what's happening in the United States now, more and more money is going up to the capitalists, the more and more wealthy, and they own vastly more amounts of the wealth than most of the other people combined. That sounds a little bit like medieval times, doesn't it? But he was in error because he did not anticipate things like trade unions and counter efforts to capitalism, which has worked. And the places where Marx was embraced were agricultural, not industrial countries. When the Bolsheviks took over Russia and the Maoists took over China, they were trying to adapt a book that was written for a revolution that was supposed to happen in the industrialized countries.
And let's be correct again. Das Kapital has got nothing to do with revolution.
But he anticipated a revolution.
Marx did, yes. Other books that Marx wrote.
Yes, he did anticipate a revolution. Yeah, and the term that's not often used anymore is scientific communism, which is what some people put Marx in. And remember, he was not the only writer on socialist issues. So there was all kinds of work going on at the time of how to implement more socialistic things. The thing Marx was different is he saw how society was evolving and how it would become less and less fair. And the only way to make sure that everybody got a utopian world out of it, the best life for every person, was communism. And that was just a starting place because it didn't work.
All right. Okay. And and basically, remember, Marx wrote somewhere near 170 years ago.
Yeah, and most of the volumes that they refer to thereafter were the ones written by Engels.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Okay. So I think we can leave it there.
Okay. Right. Without further ado, I bid you adieu.